Let me introduce you to our first keynote speaker of the day. His name is Mr. Hugh Thomas. Hugh, where are you, Hugh? If you want to start making your... There he is. Come on over. Hugh, let me tell you, is the Director of Education for Sheffield Diocese, which means he supports and resources around 40 schools across...
39.
39. Oh, that was painful.
We did a merger.
Oh, he did. He's also been a primary school teacher. He sometimes writes. This is from your Twitter biog. And he is also...
I didn't know I had
one. Do you still write occasionally? You like to write?
Less so, yes.
Less so, right. And he worships and serves as curate at Pittsmore, Christchurch Pittsmore. And he's an all-round wonderful man. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for Mr. Hugh Thomas. Here's a clicker. It may or may not work. I'll be at the back.
I'm going to do that if I may. I can't do the slick walking around with the microphone thing, I'm afraid. Can you hear me all right? Well, if you can't, you wouldn't have heard the question, would you? But, yeah. Right, thank you. It's nice to be back. I was here last year. It's nice to be here this year as well. I'm particularly taking 20 minutes just to talk to you about stories. That's what I'm going to do, basically, okay? You've got a handout with all some nice notey quotey things and stuff like that, and a book list, so I don't have to constantly be going on about that sort of thing. But you've also got the yellow strip of paper. This is where you get the yellow strip of paper out. Before we sort of get going, really, can I ask you to do a little exercise? Take your strip of paper. It's already folded in half. Can you fold it in half again? So now it's not in halves, it's in... Now here's what I want you to do. Imagine if one end of the paper, okay, the left end, is 0. We'll all be putting 0 there because we were all born at 0. And on the right end, you put your current age. So if you're 40, you put 40. If you're 39, you put 39. If you're lying, you put whatever you want to. And then I just want you to calculate that halfway mark. So if you're 40, it'll be, and if you're 39, it'll be 19.5. Put the calculator away. Get that phone back in the bag, please. I'm a primary teacher. Maths first thing in the morning is a good thing. While you're doing that, let me tell you a story while you're doing that. Have we got what we're doing? Yeah, it's up. I've done a demo up there. I've done the quarters actually as well. We'll come to that in a bit. Let me tell you a story. In fact, do the quarters, because the story you can listen at the same time. There's an old Jewish story that when the Jewish people were threatened in Europe, when they were threatened with annihilation, with pogrom, the 18th century rabbi, Israel Baal Shem Tov, one of the greatest rabbis of the Jewish tradition, he would go to a place in the forest. He would light the special fire, and he would say the special prayer, a particular prayer, and the people would be saved from annihilation. A generation passed, and Israel Baal Shem Tov's disciple, Rabbi Magid of Mezrich, he had to intervene to save the people. So he went to the same place in the forest, and he prayed to God, "Oh God, I do not know how to light the fire." But the people were saved. And another generation passed, and Rabbi Moshe of Sasov, disciple of Magid, he went into the forest to save his people, and he also said the prayer, and he prayed, "I do not know how to light the fire. I do not know the prayer, but I do know the place in the forest." And again, even then, the people were saved. Don't know the fire, don't know the prayer, but I do know the place. The people were saved. And then another generation, and we come to Rabbi Israel of Rizin. You don't need to worry about the names, but he was great-grandson of Magid. He was named for Baal Shem Tov. The people were threatened with annihilation. He sat in his armchair at home. And he prayed, holding his head in his hands. "Oh Lord, I am unable to light the fire. I do not now know the prayer. I couldn't even find the place in the forest. But I can tell the story. And again, the people were saved. I couldn't find you that place in the forest, but I do know the story. I can tell the story. We are humanity. We just are a people of stories. We just love seeing and connecting events together into stories. I wonder how many times over the course of today you will tell a story, whether it's relating an anecdote downstairs, whether it's moaning about something your boss did this week, whether it's making a Netflix recommendation. Orange is the new black. I'm just saying, orange is the new black. But as a people of faith, we are a people of stories, the stories of our faith. And I put it to you that there's two meanings to that phrase. Yes, there's the stories of our faith, the stories that got us here. The stories we'll be reading tomorrow, the stories that got us to this place. There's also the sometimes neglected stories of our faith, of your faith, of your faith, of our faith. The stories of our faith. Your story, my story, the stories of our fellowship. I'm fascinated by this place. Okay. By the way, can I just say, my son works for Hind House. Please be kind. Yeah, a bit awkward. But yeah, fascinating. Do you know, you can't get up there. Believe me, I've tried. You can't get up there. There's no doorway up there. Unless I'm wrong. And also, if you run through that door, you can chase somebody around these two doors. Believe me, we've tried. Okay. Anyway, the stories of our fellowship. Because one of the books that I'd recommend to you today, and to anyone involved in spiritual work with children, or with adults actually, so I suppose that's everybody, isn't it? Anybody involved in that sort of work, is this one. James Fowler's fantastic book, Stages of Faith. It's a beautiful unpicking of the stages we go through as we grow spiritually, and the way our thinking develops on that journey. And he narrates this shift that happens in earliest childhood. My background is, whenever people ask what I'm by trade, I will always say I'm an infant teacher by trade, okay? Basically first school. I started my life in first school education. That's my background. And he narrates a shift that I saw happening in my career, in the lives of children. When we're first born and when we're toddlers, it's all about us and everything. We relate to everything through our direct experience. We either grab it or we eat it, and we are the center of the universe. My wife says I've never left that stage. That's another matter. But it's all about me at that stage. And Fowler says then stage 2 kicks in, around about 6-7 years old. And that's the stage at which we can think beyond ourselves and our immediate experiences. Our imagination really takes off. At that stage, I could really imagine what looking in this direction looks like for somebody sat there. It starts to click in round about there. And those of you who've worked, particularly if you've worked in early years, you'll see it happening. Fowler says that at that stage, the great gift to consciousness that emerges at this stage is the ability to narratize one's experiences. To narratize one's experiences. Look, here's what that means. Grab your strip of paper. This is an exercise I do with our teachers when we're doing stuff on spiritual development. And I do it in a room because of our church schools and how we work our church schools. In that room, I will have people who are coming from deeply religious, committed Christian backgrounds, and folks who've had nothing to do with the Christian faith all their lives other than church school, and folks who are actually passionately atheistic. That's the nature of the staff teams that we take in our church schools, proudly taking them to support our church school ethos. But it's an exercise I do with that sort of a mix of room. What I'd like you to do is this. If I asked you to think of that now with your life, with those numbers representing your ages along the way. If I asked you to just jot on there 2 of the things that have happened that have shaped your life, what would you put and where would you put it? Can I just say a couple of health warnings on this? It doesn't need to be such that the person next to you can read it. So you don't need to write there, I stole £1,000 but nobody knows, all right? Ooh, look at that. Yeah. You could just put symbols on. So here we are, there's mine underneath. Right, so there, Kay, I'm quite proud of that one, quite happy. Still surprised that she did, but that's Kate, my wife, okay? That one, that's there. That's when she stepped into my life. See the smiley face? I'm not telling you about that one. That's personal, that's private, that's just me. I know what that means. It was great, okay? Just put a couple more on while we're sat here, because we're not doing anything else at the moment, are we? We may as well. But this time, if you haven't already, veer towards the spiritual. Veer towards things that are part of your spiritual shape. You can keep adding to that. So you'll see at the bottom half there, that's where I've ended up thus far with mine. It's still growing. What Fowler's saying is the great gift to consciousness is that ability to narratize our experiences. We get concepts like time and sequence, and our children start to be able to tell their stories. And he also says that because of that, at this stage, children become particularly attentive and stay particularly attentive to the formative stories of their community. This is the age at which, if you were born next to Swansea Docks, I mean, not quite literally, there was a house in between, but yeah, if you were born next to Swansea Docks, you lap up the stories of Swansea Docks from your forebears, from your parents and grandparents. You grow to love the stories of your community. Stories like the story of the notorious drunk teapot who went missing at Christmas time and was found eventually. There's a long story to it, we haven't got time for it, but he was found up a chimney in some drunken Santa Claus attempt that he was taking, saying foul things up a chimney. And I'm bound to that town through those stories. Even though most of those streets, the stories are about to be demolished, I'm bound to that town. And that's what we do. That's what's at work when we tell stories of Exodus, of exile, of Lion's Den, of cross, of resurrection, of Pentecost. Fowler says this stage brings the ability to bind our experiences into meaning through the medium of stories. So when it comes to Christian faith, it's a faith that binds us to story. Story isn't just a means of recalling where we came from. Our beliefs are stories. We believe stories, fundamentally, in this faith of ours. It isn't often I say fundamentally, but we do, okay? If you think about it, the Bible does not say God so loved the world. What it says is, God so loved the world that. And then a story is told. And I need a faith like that, because if I'm being honest, I sometimes find the whole God thing quite a weird idea. I sometimes sit there and think, actually, do I really believe this stuff? It's a bit strange, isn't it? Am I the only one? Can you just give a wave at me? Okay, that's nice to know. Okay, that's great. Okay, yeah. Tend to do it most mornings during morning prayer. Actually, what's that about? I wonder. You know. How is it that when I tell the story, I don't feel so conflicted? What's that about? It feels more natural. And this is my second thought. My first one, I've already gone past that one, is this thing about binding ourselves to stories, okay? I'm terrible at doing 3 points, okay? But yeah, that's first one, okay? Have you got that one? Right, move on. Okay, second one. Stories can carry stuff that can't get carried in any other way. Honestly, I really struggle with the idea, if you told me now you were going to do it, I would tell you it's impossible. If you told me you were going to walk on water, I just still struggle with the idea somebody ever did that. I've never struggled with telling the story. I think it's one of the most beautiful and affirming stories I tell, and I see it happening every time I read it. Look, honestly, I struggle with the idea that a dead man was alive 3 days later. Can I still do the keynote? I haven't said that, I'm just checking, but I really struggle with that idea. But I have walked the road to Emmaus, and my heart has burned within me as I've walked with the people who walked that road for the first time and talked to that rabbi on that journey. I have actually quite literally walked the road to Emmaus as well. It is now a really horrible motorway, and I don't recommend doing it at any time at all. But I've read that story, and I know that story. I don't know the place in the forest, but I can tell the story. See, creeds don't do that. Creeds tend to rush in where stories are still allowing us a bit of room for fascination. Now, please don't go back to your churches tomorrow and say the Director of Education abolished creeds on Saturday morning. But the fact is, the church was still telling stories of crucifixion, of a baby born, of a resurrection, when the creeds rushed in and codified it all and tried to set it down. And the problem is, we do the same. How many times when I'm telling people about what Jesus means to me, have I treated him like some node in a diagram? Oh, sin, oh, oh, eternal destiny, oh, but Jesus, sin, woo, job done. And I believe that, I believe it. But if I was Matthew, Mark, or the other two, I would be fuming at me at that point. I'd be saying, what about the shepherds? We gave you a story with tables being turned over. We handed you a story. What have you lot done with it? My concern is we risk losing the power of story to shake us, to make us gasp, cry, snigger, to find some of the brilliance in there. There's a reason why we were forged in time and given our stories rather than just creeds, basically. And it's a reason, I think, rooted in what God is about. If you think about it, what is creation if not the biggest narrative ever? The great writer in story, Daniel Taylor. By the way, can I just say, Fowler and Taylor, they're on your lists. They're not downstairs. There are a few books I'm going to wave in a moment that are downstairs that are cracking on this stuff. But a writer called Daniel Taylor, who writes beautifully on story, he once said, story understands that if we do not know something emotionally, we do not know it completely. If we don't know it emotionally, we don't know it completely. And that's my third one. My third story thought. Stories engage all of us. Not as in all of us, but in all of us. The central event of our faith is not a belief, it's a love story. So I'm asking you, when was the last time you read the Bible and fell in love again? So how do we do this? Two quick thoughts on how we actually do this, because there's one I get really naffed off about, so I'm going to have a rant. Ready? Here we go. One thing we need to do to make stories come alive and live and breathe and make us gasp again is this. We've got to stop using them. Just stop using stories. Just stop it, okay? Stop using them, start reading them, start telling them, start enjoying them, start engaging with them. And to do that, and I'll just wave Ivy Beckworth's excellent book on formational children's ministry, which has a brilliant section on this that I've got some quotes from in your stuff downstairs on the bookstore. To do that, we have to get rid of this idea that a story has to be about something, that we have to squeeze the lesson out of the story. Oh, children, storm on the lake, storm, Jesus, whoa, yeah. And do you know what that's about? It's saying that tomorrow, if you feel a bit nervous, Jesus is with you. Now, I believe that. I believe Jesus speaks to my anxiety. That story speaks to my anxiety. And I'm one who's really suffered with it. But it's so much more than that. So much more. Give the story room. Let the story breathe. This is the reason why sermons can sometimes be quite duff. Now, please don't go back to your churches tomorrow and say the Director of Education abolished sermons. Who's that? You want that one? I'm just kicking out the idea that they have a message, that they have the message. The fact is, we don't go to the Mona Lisa and say, what's that about? Oh, it's about a cryptic smile. Write down cryptic smile. Right, you can ditch the artwork now. That was lovely, wasn't it? We keep going back to great works of art. Think about it. That's the secret of love, actually. And it's also the secret of the Bible. Great works of art that you revisit again and again and again. Don't go back to your churches and say that the Director of Education put the Bible on a par with love, actually. No. Okay. So we need to learn to tell the story for the story's sake. Next time a preacher says, this is what this story is about, you have license to blow a loud raspberry, a really loud one. You can say that you were given license to do it at that conference that Mike North organised. Okay? Second one, quick one this. We also need to get well into the habit of telling our stories. As a people of story, we need to tell our stories. We often narrow it down to the story of how we came to Christ, how we came to believe. I have one myself that I cherish and thank God for. But we often narrow it down there. Grab your piece of paper again. Last time. Just grab it. Look at those folds. Forget events for a moment. Look at the numbers. Let me just ask you where you were there, because God was up to something there, and I want to know what. And lest anybody say to me, well, it's unremarkable, it's not that dramatic, let me just remind you, you are a precious child of God, with a life and story God has gifted to you that is infinitely precious to God. Your story is infinitely precious to God, so don't argue, basically. I wonder if the young people you work with know the bits and bobs of your story along the way. I wonder if they know the story of your church and your fellowship. Crucially as well, I wonder if we give them the chance to tell their faith stories. I could say so much more on that, but I don't need to, because Steve Morris has written a fantastic book which is only just out, hot off the shelves, on the bookstore downstairs, called Our Precious Lives. It is fantastic material. While I'm waving around, let me also just say, if you want to let stories live and breathe, particularly gospel stories, that's what I'll be thinking about later this morning, but particularly, all of us here want to really have a go at giving gospel stories a bit of living, breathing room. One of the best books written, I think, for this sort of thing, The Tell It Together Gospel Mark by Paula Gooder and Bob Hartman. Not a retelling. I have a real downer on children's Bibles and the way they murder Bible stories, okay? No. This one dares to believe, as we do in our church schools, that from infants onwards, somebody can open an actual, real, live, good news Bible and read it to you, and you're not so daft you won't be able to understand what's going on. They don't need to sugar their pill or anything like that. That's what this book does as well. One last wave. Just show me your slips, just so I can check you've done your work, basically. It's the teacher in me. Just take a look around the room. Precious lives. So these are what it's all about. The stories of our faith. Thanks for your time.